Hi, I'm Jessie Ashe, and this is a satire of an evil car maker meeting. But don't get me wrong, all of this has happened right under our nose. Regarding our compressed natural gas, CNG cars, can we spend just $1 more per piece to make our gas cylinders safe? No, let these green maniacs blow up. Then there are less election votes to stop the production of combustion engines. Besides, we own politics and the media anyway. They're all ignorant. Otherwise, they would have to do some work for their money, right? So nobody will be informed or even care. What if somehow, e.g., through the EU, they'll try to forbid combustion engines? Then we'll bribe some of those a-holes who call themselves liberals. But actually, they're just liberal to taking bribes. They are more or less part of the governments, and they'll get us an exception for e-fuels. They will never be affordable, but they'll open the possibility for selling those evil-sounding combustion engines and for evil doing in terms of always keeping it easy to run them with cheap, old-fashioned, super gasoline from our corrupt friends, the sheikhs. The main reasons we've not pushed electric vehicle tech forward, that's EV, for the last 100 years, even though it was always there, always with higher energy and environmental efficiency and fewer moving parts that could break. It just didn't pay bribes and doesn't produce as many garage visits to force people to pay our repair experts 4 times more than we pay external IT innovation experts. EVs must be driven for more than 100,000 miles until they break even with classical cars in terms of environmental footprint due to the many resources needed for these batteries and the dirty mining around it in every aspect, if you know what I mean. So for nature, EVs have only a small effect. However, they have a big effect on draining the pockets of those eco-freaks so they won't finance other stupid things with that money, like their own regenerative energy production or exerting political pressure. And of course, for us, these EVs cash out big in the billions, even more with those hefty governmental subsidies, and that in spite of the car maker jobs having gone down to roughly quarter over the last 25 years in Europe. Can you imagine how many bribes we paid for being able to argue with jobs for getting subsidies that we then eliminated? And the media didn't pick it up. By the way, we're not just artificially inflating garage visits now with our latest crappy electronics generation. I'd really like to keep those electronic systems that control new cars a bit insecure. Then criminals can't just hack the odometer, but directly make any car digitally an escaped car and let it come directly to the exit of the bank that they're robbing. Even though physically robbing a bank is really old-fashioned, now that it's so easy to rob them digitally. Unfortunately, once control systems are hacked, that would also allow to shift a car into reverse at full speed. That would make the car blow up spectacularly. The media would probably report, and that is really the only thing holding us back from allowing us to do this easily. But we're doing something very similar with the insecure keyless Go system now that allows quick digital stealing of cars with the easy manipulation of odometers to be able to sell more used cars touted as garage cars, along with our bribes to not pressure Eastern European and Asian countries to no longer support the order theft of our cars and their import into these countries. These are multi-billion-dollar factors each. And of course, we're using billions of European research funding and foreign investment default insurances to continuously export jobs from Europe into third world countries where we produce them under slave-like conditions. The European politicians are so corrupt that they don't even mind ruining the basis of their now fast vanishing prosperity. And with corresponding bribes and internet bots, it's possible to keep under the hood that EVs typically only reach half of their operating range in winter, and that, of course, all values regarding range and energy usage are highly beautified due to test conditions that require the highest level of technical, legal, and corruption wizardry, similar to the diesel exhaust values, but not making a scandal out of it. Shouldn't we test a local startup with a few 10,000 euros that we know can easily inspect, has fair hourly rates, and great work ethics that's transparent and fair? No, they're just jerks and don't have big references. Of course, also because we don't give them a chance. Should we instead pay billions for possibly stolen autonomous vehicle, AV, software to people who worked for Google, are spoiled and used to earning well, but might not be able to improve upon the assets that they probably stole? Yes, they are further away and thus offer the intransparency that allows us to get high bribes and to position our retarded friends in these companies. And because they'll need additional rights, which take months to assign to them, they'll always have an excuse not to work. Should we pay contractors well? We could make the rights set up processes efficiently. No, then the above would not work. When we ramp up our EV production, can we also keep and improve our CNG production? No, the main component of CNG, methane, is 84 times more dangerous to the climate than CO2 over 20 years. And we don't want to invest to avoid leaks at all, not even $1 per car. We can't keep the media silent on this much longer, in spite of the billions we're paying. Some journalists sometimes at least skim over the research papers. Then it's better to dump this technology altogether with the support infrastructure. Let these green weirdos experiment with hydrogen or some other explosive gases. Maybe we'll get rid of some more of them this way. And if they don't find any maintenance service, they'll have to buy new cars. EVs are still far from mature, but we'll just bribe the journalists to be silent about generally smaller ranges battery lifetimes, and just half the range under freezing temperatures. We'll set up some social media bots to claim the issues have in the meanwhile been resolved in case people complain about that. Of course, they depend on the battery tech. That will only change when we can cheaply get a hold of the rights to the next battery tech. Maybe sabotaging one of the startups into which so many billions were invested by people without our evil genius. And once we've got billions of subsidies to build a battery factory, and once the factory is fully built and operational under EU bureaucracy, that can easily take a decade. So a lot of work for the bots. Which name shall we use for our operating system venture? Let's use Car Aid, reminding me of Carrie Ann in those horror movies. Then we can carry the evil from the motor noise and manipulation one step further in the direction of head-up controls and mind control. Moreover, looking at Google, from which much of the software is said to come, also for us, carrying ads might be a bigger market than carrying people. Our diesel fraud came to light. We've done even more to hide it or bribe it away, but that failed in the end. Let's do it as in the film Back to the Future. We just make up some smart-looking device that improves the flow of something and treat it like a flux compensator, flux capacitor for 50 cents and build it in. I don't mean the wrapper. For much more, we'll buy a thermo window from our politician friends that will allow us to not oblige with the regulations under most temperatures. We'll just do that under current policy hot temperatures. These pseudo experts and those authorities in car journals are anyway far too dumb to prove us wrong. They just want to be deceived instead of investing time to understand the details so they can spread another lie, as they're used to doing, thus avoiding that we lose too much profit. But why did we build that flux capacitor before? Will the public even believe that it's so simple a solution can be significant as we claim, yet we didn't implement it before? We own politics and media so completely that we can tell them any lie and they will spread it. And of course, adding a flux capacitor would have reduced our profits just a bit. But for so many million cars, that could cut into our prostitution budget delicately. For some motors, it might actually burn less fuel. None of our bigger shareholders of the oil sheikh category would like that. It only gets worse. What about hiring real experts to really innovate? That's too boring, bribery-wise, I mean, and it gives nerds too much power. Let's instead pay corrupt lawyers to make things excruciating, but our bribes reverberating. That gives me a final great idea. We could stop all of our autonomous vehicle, AV research activities silently. That might cause the complete irrelevance in this company, within 10 years. But hey, it would give us, due to saved costs, several years of additional billion-dollar profits and correspondingly high bonuses. But wouldn't we then lose complete understanding not only of the AV tech, but also of our own software code? What makes you think that's our code? Just as the diesel engine manipulation code's functionality at least finally was understood by court-appointed experts who finally were properly paid. Maybe that's the only way for our autonomous driving efforts too. We'll find some culprit we can sue or some idiot that sues us. Then the software documentation can be funded through that, then by experts who don't need to work for 4 times below the market rates and understand their subject. Meanwhile, we could put some of those saved billions into media and admission authority managers, if you know what I mean, to stir interest in these AV cars and approve them that will then only reach around 50 miles per hour max speed, just enough to maybe be driven in the slipstream of a truck. Maybe we'll sponsor some sexy ads at the back of these to make such driving more interesting. We'll give the media people a bonus if they find more than 250,000 idiots who are willing to pay more than $250,000 for such a relatively useless car. We'll call it 250K squared. That number also standing for the aspiration of our bonuses. Of course, with some corporations and empty promises to update it later to a fully fledged autopilot. Once people find out about this, we will be in different corporations and driving with our fat bonuses better cars than the ones of this corporation. Life can be so great if you don't give a hoot about other people. We urgently need to launch an entire array of activities to not fall into insignificance and oblivion in China. Chinese companies make gigantic progress in R&D. They produce cheaper and they automate more. I would never have thought that Chinese could overtake us that quickly after all of these China cracker jokes. It feels nearly as humiliating as if we were overtaken by the East German Trebi factory. But at that time, bribing the responsible but disloyal decision makers was much cheaper than nowadays in China, where managers actually want to bring their country forward, not just themselves and their own car. Yes, Europe is only innovative regarding ripoff. The Chinese implement real innovation, e.g., around quickly exchanging batteries in minutes instead of having to charge for hours. But currently, our research money is mostly invested into the research of human sexuality in the form of whores. What I mean is, we're influencing the police and politicians to legalize prostitution and weed because they don't get prosecuted anyway. That would make our costs drop in that area. Even if someone gets caught for significantly shortening the lives of billions of people due to illegal exhausts and causing additional billions in costs for lung therapies each year over many decades, the worst case is the following. After investing millions in finding out what he's done wrong over 5 or more years, he'll make a partial confession and will then only receive a suspended sentence. The taxpayers will always get the bigger punishment by having to bear the real costs. We can maximally invest $1 billion into a research center to catch up with the Chinese companies. We'll exploit those Uyghurs in those concentration camps. That gives me an idea. Now we can recover some costs. Just reuse our knowledge regarding manipulative software to also manipulate the car breakdown intervals and to make the required repairs more expensive. Just puts more pressure on the Chinese by tightening their job-related social scoring. They're already used to that. We've already devoted some money of our research. If abusing sedated athletes during their medical exams can cost less, but these doctors are spoiled and expensive. And even for fake doctors, the hush money is high. Therefore, this entire slithery, lubricious, delicate ecosystem is close to deliquesce, or to melt away or dissolve. You see what's happened in the Catholic Church? If we don't pay attention, we'll autopilot into that route. We just don't have many people blindly believing us compared to the church. With Colonia Dignidad in Chile, one of these camps for sexual abuse and processing of oppositional human flesh for Chile's dictators has already become known. Its founder, Paul Schaefer, was even too much of a pedophile for the Catholic Church. That means something. Together with the Brazilians that already led to enough corned beef. Let's not produce more carnage or another Soylent Green by engaging in further shady business to save more costs. Should we give some rights and compensations to Europeans as to Americans regarding the diesel issue? No. For that, we're paying too many bribes to European politicians. We've also bought the police and many judges. Without massive greenwashing, there is not enough green energy, not enough minerals, no supply chain security, chip supplies, battery minerals, all insufficient. And we've also haven't fully recovered from the cable cartel and the outsourced production to the Ukraine that then got disrupted. Maybe we should consider that these Chinese companies could show us Western car makers how important it is to treat suppliers well, to get enough chips. We don't need to do that. We have all the power, me and my fellow managers at the other car makers. We're all flocking so much together that we're raising our prices similarly. To that end, we are coincidentally stopping the production of non-luxury cars. We'll ask the state for billions of reduced hours compensation for the many workers that won't work on producing more eco-friendly cars with lower profit margins anymore to get new record profits funded by the general population so the super rich can thrive. Those who are not rich, of course, will have the supply in the car segments they can afford substantially reduced, and thus the prices will rise and they'll have to pay more. Not in this just one or two categories, but in three: cars, taxes, and social deductions. This is how we deal with the financial scissors between the rich and the poor. We'll start the production when profits get interesting enough for us, in spite of the Chinese competition, or Not at all if governments don't implement appropriate measures to guarantee us the profits we want. We'll do it similarly to the cable cartel before, even though it was not so good that this was revealing that much of the production had long before been moved to the Ukraine and is now threatened by war, and possibly EU or national subsidies were also misappropriated. But anyway, guess why I know that we'll get these billions of subsidies approved? So far, we didn't take anybody seriously. EVs, Teslas, Chinese, Car2X communication, suppliers, resources. Don't forget that one of our key founders worked in a tank construction for the Nazis. Yep. He had nerves of steel and constructed a super heavy tank. And to distract and hide that fact, he called it Mouse. That was far too big to work in the direction of their intended purpose, just as today's SUVs and our egos. But that problem of being too big only became evident to the others at the end and produced the need for better motors and thus more orders, money, and power for him. Similarly, we'll just push through. We'll never run out of devious energy. Shouldn't we at least try to finally reduce the emissions? Yes, superficially. We'll add some shitty urine product and we'll sell it at extremely high prices. We will literally turn dung into gold. But we'll not sell it as add P or add yellow or add brown, but more innovative and distracting from its ingredients and purposes, just like add blue. To not lose the Eastern Europeans, we'll make it easy to shortcut that, as we've been doing for the last decades with all our cars. Then we'll hire some retired and retarded lost lung professor who will accidentally make a 1,000 times error and claim that candle smoke is much more harmful than our exhaust. The agenda behind climate actionism is to make consumers feel guilty and pay for most innovations and investments. And for us, this means that states and consumers should pay our R&D for EVs, even though they're less beneficial for nature and for our balance sheet even more so. Ohm's law dictates that you get electricity through the path of lowest resistance. Normally, your nearest power plant. There are no magical switches that splice off a bit of eco electricity and send it to your household through thousands of miles and electrical devices. That's a belief on the level of the tooth fairy, but still common thanks to the marketing of billionaires. Instead, like most green offerings, green electricity is pure greenwashing. Countries like Norway, with much water power, sell cheap certificates to companies who then, due to deceptive laws, claim to offer green electricity. In reality, that only moves the bar a few cents. And on paper, Norway will be a little dirtier and your country a little cleaner, but nobody cares. Effects on nature are negligible, especially compared to the effects on sales and profits of greenwashers. It's not a good way to incentivize building green power plants. And it's even dangerous because people are deluded into thinking they've already given nature a significant benefit and thus not giving any money to efficient green projects instead of greenwashing ripoffs. As with our advertisements, even when charged with real green electricity from a green power plant nearby, the ROI will only happen after around 100,000 miles. Of course, we don't tell people that, but instead we raise our prices significantly for EVs and make a lot of greenwashing advertising to delude these green idiots to give us their excess money and fund our research. Even if mostly it goes into the research of human sexuality. But since we're rapidly losing EV market shares in China, our brand new factories there had just been in use for a few months when the business was lost to cheaper Chinese brands with better EV offerings. Don't be such a sourpuss. We'll revive those funny ads in which we let our cars fall from a helicopter to become faster, and then reveal a way how we think we'll become faster. Then we continue to show how our engineers grow wings with each new invention that will outperform the Chinese. That worked really great in explaining how we magically got the excellent exhaust values. Before the real reasons became public in 2015 with the diesel scandal, this is also beating back. There is already Slavia satire out there because we are among those whose subcontractors didn't pay their truckers at all, and who then went partially on strike and got beaten up by the subcontractors' security service. They're criticizing that truckers are recruited always further in the east, currently going beyond Eastern Europe until the Philippines, and I'm not sure if it'll arrive back in our German sour land. Hakuna Matata, the circle of exploitative life. It's too easy to bribe decision makers with money, sex, caviar, or if necessary, by adding some special chemicals. Maybe this was the reason why politicians signed environmental standards they never wanted to achieve and made it illegal for most Craftsman vans to even drive into the cities, which made those politicians and media people who could not be reached anymore speak of a shortage of craftsmen, blaming single employees or suppliers as before, even though several of them admitted to have been involved in the diesel exhaust fraud. It won't help. Maybe some loss of know-how would have been preventable with the latest AI and cybersecurity to minimize hacking. Also, its suppliers thinking that they'd share solutions inexpensively with suppliers without ripoffs is, of course, a very naive thought. Then they didn't want to invest a few millions in this before. With that money, they could even have created the best open source, real-time AI-based cybersecurity system to the benefit of everybody, except the hackers. But now that it is probably too late, then try hastily to invest billions with the support of governments. They'll probably now only have the option to take refuge in criminal measures like before, such as poaching competitors' key employees with their secret documents, beat and torture employees to program a little faster, or reverse the espionage process. Now the West spying on the East. In spite of the obvious advent of AI, the car makers showed no change in any strategy at all, and even no noteworthy reaction in spite of many announcements and competitors. How could they have been that sleepy or in a delusion to develop their own operating system that they didn't look at anything else? Did they fall victim to some Silicon Valley marketers who used the expression operating system for what they saw as better software platform? Were the decision makers just too arrogant or simply too old to not see that they need to leverage AI? Maybe they were too deeply entrenched in their cost savings mode. Of course, only regarding others and their own power play wizardry that backfired. Maybe they were hoping for some additional corrupt dozens of billions in research aid, or they were waiting until several autonomous driving startups would fail. Maybe exactly because they wouldn't offer them fair contracts, and their assets or their engineers along with maybe stolen assets would work cheaply for them. Did they underestimate the risk averseness and failure to even fund in such startups in the EU? Maybe they hoped, since evil starts with EV, their lawyers could continue their evil innovation games in electronic vehicles with startups and suppliers around playing their unfair power abuse toolbox, like requiring companies to put their entire source codes and IT architecture document into escrow, and they could somehow get this and continue from there with some key employees that would be happy with the standard rates that they pay of roughly 4 times less than they charge for experts in their repair shops per hour. It seems that not every evil plan succeeds, even if it continues Hitler's evil automotive and now economic war plans, or that STDs like syphilis really take a high mental toll. Anyhow, this shows what happens when blocking innovation and misappropriating financial and human resources. Their reputation after that has been stinking to heaven, like that Charon car of the 5,000 by 5,000 program, in which a lost worker lost his fish rolls. And in both cases, they only found that out much later. Craftsmen working for private projects of those automotive engineers found that out much earlier. The company culture, with its arrogance, had sifted down to the engineers and craftsmen, righteously rejected that early on. Everybody else needed much longer. Now they don't need to innovate anymore. All EU car makers in China have less than 2% EV market share, just below 1% in the EV market in China, which will quickly be as big as the US and EU markets together. Judging from their decision to prioritize developing their own crappy operating system, 50 plus years after the OS battle has become irrelevant, they must be at insight levels of 1970s in the USA, when Unix and the precursors of the free Linux were developed. Then it will probably take 50 years until they're management will be on the insight level of the market leader, Tesla, but they already became irrelevant regarding EVs in China and soon will become completely irrelevant. So this insight will not get through. But that was just too expectable from their evil, selfish behavior without any sense for what others are doing or feeling. If you don't want to go through the suffering of working for such despotic managers or become unemployed and fight for survival in an industrial wasteland, then help make Potentialism Net a reality to directly transform and improve our governments, corporations, and people towards ethical, high-tech innovation. Find out more information at potentialism.net. Thank you for joining us.